No storm-tossed seas, no frozen mountain roads. Instead, we follow muddy lantern-lit streets toward one of the warmest inns in all of Eriador, a place where weary travelers gather beside crackling fires while stories drift softly through the smoke-filled air. The Prancing Pony, an old inn standing quietly at the crossroads of the north. Tonight, we spend a peaceful evening there, listening to travelers' tales while rain taps softly against the windows outside. So before the fire burns low and the stories begin, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy these slow, relaxing journeys through the cozy corners of Middle-earth. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me which tavern or inn from Tolkien's world you'd most want to visit on a cold, rainy night. Now, let the world grow quiet around you. And let us wander eastward toward Bree while dusk settles gently across the hills. Rain begins falling just before sunset. A soft, steady rain drifting across the green hills west of Bree. Mud gathers slowly along the old road, while wagon wheels creak heavily through puddles, reflecting the final traces of gray evening light. Far ahead, warm lanterns begin glowing through the mist. Breathe, the little hill town, resting safely beside ancient roads and weathered stone walls. Travelers always feel relief upon seeing those lights, because beyond Bree lie long, lonely miles, ruined watchtowers, dark forests, gold wilderness, stretching north and east beneath uncertain skies. But Bree itself feels lived in, safe, a warm pocket of firelight between dangerous roads. A small company of weary travelers approaches through the rain. A dwarf merchant leading a stubborn pony cart loaded with trade goods. A traveling scholar from the south, wrapped carefully in heavy cloaks. And a quiet ranger walking several paces behind them, with rain dripping steadily from his dark hood. The muddy road curves gently upward toward Bree's southern gate. Lanterns sway above the streets. Smoke rises warmly from chimneys. The smell of wet earth, pipe smoke, and fresh bread drifts softly through the cool evening air. Inside the town walls, life still hums quietly despite the weather. Merchants hurry beneath cloaks toward closing shops. Stable boys guide horses through the rain. Warm yellow light spills from cottage windows onto the muddy streets below. At the center of Bree stands the Prancing Pony, wide, warm, bright against the dark, rainy evening. Its lantern sign creaks softly above the doorway, while laughter and music drift faintly outward into the street. The travelers exchange relieved looks almost immediately. Few sounds feel more comforting after long roads than a busy inn during rain. The dwarf pushes open the heavy wooden door. Warmth floods outward instantly. Firelight, wood smoke, the smell of stew and roasted onions. Inside, the common room glows gold beneath low timber beams, darkened by decades of smoke. Travelers crowd the long wooden tables, speaking softly over mugs of ale, while several hobbits near the hearth laugh quietly at some half-finished joke. A fiddler in the corner plays a slow, cheerful tune beside the fire. The entire inn feels alive. Not loud, comfortably busy. The kind of warmth only old inns seem able to hold. Barlaman Butterbur himself soon appears from behind the counter, carrying several steaming bowls balanced expertly in both hands. Round-faced, red-cheeked, already slightly out of breath. "Evening, travelers," he says warmly. Plenty of room by the fire if you don't mind squeezing in a bit. No one minds. The company settles gratefully near the great hearth while rain taps steadily against the windows beyond. Wet cloaks hang beside the fire. Boots steam gently near the warmth. Ranger quietly chooses a shadowed chair near the back wall where he can watch the room without being noticed too easily. The scholar wraps cold hands around a mug of hot cider while sighing deeply. And the dwarf immediately begins attacking, a thick loaf of brown bread still warm from the ovens. Outside, night settles fully across Bree. Rain continues falling over the rooftops and winding streets. But inside the Prancing Pony, warmth pushes the darkness far away. The fiddler changes tunes. Several travelers begin telling stories beside the hearth. One speaks about wolves glimpsed near the greenway. Another claims to have crossed the misty mountains during a blizzard so fierce the snow buried entire wagons overnight. A hobbit near the fire insists he once saw elves walking beneath the stars beyond the Shire. The common room listens with sleepy fascination, because stories feel richer during rainy nights, especially in old inns where strangers gather beneath lantern light. The scholar eventually notices the ranger quietly smoking his pipe beside the wall. "You travel often?" he asks. The ranger nods once. "Enough." "Dangerous roads?" The ranger glances briefly toward the rain-dark windows. Sometimes. Again, silence settles comfortably. No one presses further. The fire crackles warmly between them. The smell of cedar smoke and stew fills the room. And outside the Prancing Pony, the roads of Middle-earth disappear quietly into rain and darkness, while stories continue drifting softly through the warm golden light of the inn. The rain grows heavier outside. Water runs steadily down the windows of the Prancing Pony while cold wind rattles softly against the shutters. But inside the inn, warmth deepens with every passing hour. The great hearth crackles brightly beneath the dark timber beams. Lantern light glows gold across mugs, maps, and tired faces weathered by long roads. The smell of stew still lingers pleasantly through the common room, mixed with pipe smoke, wet wool, and fresh bread cooling near the kitchens. Travelers settle deeper into their chairs while the storm settles over Bree. No one seems eager to leave tonight, not while the rain drums steadily outside and the fire burns this warmly. The fiddler near the hearth shifts into another slow tune, soft, comfortable. The kind of music that belongs beside lantern light and old stories. Several hobbits hum quietly along while finishing mugs of cider near the fire. One elderly farmer from the western hills dozes peacefully beside the hearth, with his hat tilted over his eyes. Barleyman Butterbird continues moving carefully between tables, balancing trays piled high with steaming food. Roasted potatoes, onion soup, thick slices of dark bread, spread with melting butter. The innkeeper pauses briefly beside the travelers. "Storm will last all night by the sound of it." The dwarf nods approvingly. "Good weather for staying indoors. Best kind." Butterbur agrees warmly. The scholar eventually leans back beside the fire while listening to the conversations drifting through the room. Every table seems to carry another story. Merchants discussing southern trade roads, farmers speaking quietly about harvests and weather, a pair of travelers from distant lands debating whether snow has already fallen in the northern hills. And occasionally laughter rises softly above it all, before settling once more into the warm, steady hum of the inn. The ranger remains mostly silent near the back wall. Pipe smoke curls lazily upward through the lantern light while rainwater slowly dries from his weathered cloak beside the fire. Yet, despite his silence, the room somehow feels calmer, knowing he is there. Like an old tree standing quietly against a storm. At some point during the evening, one of the hobbits near the hearth notices the ranger's sword leaning beside his chair. You've seen dangerous places then? The ranger glances toward the flames for several moments. Some. The hobbit shifts eagerly. Any ghosts? Several nearby travelers chuckle softly. The ranger exhales a slow ribbon of pipe smoke. Mostly rain. Laughter spreads warmly around the common room. Even the ranger smiles faintly afterward. The fire pops softly beside them. Outside, thunder rolls low beyond Bree's hills. The rain shows no sign of ending. And somehow that only makes the inn feel cozier. The scholar eventually opens a weathered leather journal while sitting beside the hearth. Its pages contain notes gathered during years of wandering through Middle-earth. Road conditions, old songs, stories traded in distant taverns. The scholar pauses thoughtfully before speaking. An inn remembers more stories than most castles. The dwarf grunts quietly. Castles hold kings. Inns hold travelers. Again, comfortable silence settles afterward. As everyone there understands the truth of it, roads bring strangers together, and places like the Prancing Pony give those strangers warmth long enough to become companions for a night. The fiddler eventually lowers his instrument, while another traveler near the fire begins telling a story instead. A sailor from the Grey Havens wrapped in heavy sea cloaks, smelling faintly of salt and cedar. He speaks softly about western storms beyond the Gulf of Loon, about waves so enormous they swallowed moonlight itself, about distant elf ships disappearing silently into the western sea beneath the stars. The entire common room listens quietly. Even the ranger looks up from his pipe. Rain taps steadily against the windows. The fire glows warm orange beside the storyteller. And for a little while, the travelers of Bree drift far beyond the inn into stormy seas and silver western horizons, carried there only by words. That is the magic of old inns. Not merely warmth, not merely shelter, but stories. Stories shared beside the fire, while darkness gathers safely outside. Hours drift onward. The storm deepens around Bree. Lanterns sway gently in the streets beyond the windows. Most of the town now sleeps beneath rain and darkness. But inside the Prancing Pony, the common room still glows softly with music, quiet conversation, and the peaceful comfort of weary travelers resting together beside the hearth. The scholar eventually closes the journal. The dwarf orders another bowl of stew. The ranger stares thoughtfully into the flames, and somewhere outside, beyond Bree's walls, lonely roads continue winding through forests and ruined hills beneath the rain-dark night of Middle-earth. Let us remain beside the fire a little longer while the rain falls over Bree and stories drift softly through the warm common room of the Prancing Pony. The night deepens slowly around the inn. Rain continues whispering against the windows, while occasional gusts of wind rattle the shutters facing the muddy streets outside. But within the Prancing Pony, warmth settles heavier with every passing hour. The great hearth burns low and steady now. Deep orange embers pulse beneath dark logs, while soft firelight flickers across the common room. Many travelers have grown quieter. The excitement of arrival has faded into comfortable tiredness. Several hobbits sleep peacefully near the hearth, with mugs still resting beside their chairs. A merchant from the south snores gently beneath a heavy cloak while his pony cart waits safely outside beneath the stable roof. The fiddler now plays only occasionally, slow, wandering melodies, soft enough to blend with the sound of rain. Barlaman Buttererd finally settles briefly behind the counter after hours spent carrying trays through the crowded inn. He wipes his brow with a cloth while surveying the room proudly. The Prancing Pony always feels fullest during storm nights. Travelers gather naturally where warmth and stories wait. The ranger still sits quietly near the back wall. Pipe smoke curls lazily upward beside him, while his weathered boots dry slowly near the fire. The scholar notices him studying the windows thoughtfully. You prefer the road to inns? The ranger considers the question. Depends on the weather. Several nearby travelers laugh softly. Even the ranger seems more relaxed now beneath the glow of the hearth. Outside, Bree has nearly disappeared beneath darkness and rain. The streets stand empty except for swaying lanterns and puddles shimmering gold beneath the light. Beyond the town walls stretch the wild lands of Eriador, cold hills, ruined watchtowers, endless roads winding through shadow beneath the storm. Inside the inn, the wider world feels far away. That is the gift of old taverns. For a few peaceful hours, travelers can forget difficult roads waiting beyond the door. The sailor from the Grey Havens eventually begins another story beside the hearth, this one quieter than before. He speaks of standing on western shores beneath silver moonlight, watching white elven ships vanish slowly into the sea. No one interrupts. Even the rain seems softer while he speaks. The common room listens with sleepy fascination. The sailor's voice drifts calmly through the warm, smoky air. Stories feel different after midnight. Less like entertainment. More like dreams shared aloud beside the fire. The scholar eventually adds stories of southern kingdoms. Sunlit courtyards, markets glowing with lanterns beside warm rivers, old libraries filled with maps copied by candlelight. Then the dwarf speaks briefly of mountain halls beneath snow-covered peaks where forge fires burn through the long winter dark. And slowly the common room fills with distant places, forests, harbors, mountains, ancient roads beneath the stars, all gathered together within the little inn at Bree. The ranger finally speaks again after long silence. The road is easier when you know warm places still exist. Again the room grows quietly thoughtful, because every traveler understands that feeling. The memory of firelight during cold weather, warm soup after rain, lanterns glowing safely through darkness. The Prancing Pony has offered such comfort for generations, long before tonight's storm, long before most of the people gathered there were born. At some point after midnight, Butterbur begins dimming several lanterns around the common room. The inn glows softer now, amber light, deep shadows, rain tapping gently beyond the windows. The scholar's eyelids grow heavy beside the warmth. One hobbit quietly curls beneath his cloak near the fire. Even the sailor's stories begin slowing into comfortable silence. The ranger eventually rises from his chair and steps briefly toward the window. Rain still falls steadily over Bree. The roads beyond town vanish into darkness, yet somehow the storm no longer feels unpleasant, only peaceful. The ranger watches the lanterns outside sway gently in the weather, then returns calmly toward the fire. Because tonight, there is no need for lonely roads, only warmth, stories, and the steady comfort of the Prancing Pony holding back the dark for a little while longer. The fiddler plays one final quiet tune before resting the instrument beside the hearth. Its soft melody lingers through the room, even after the music ends. The fire crackles. Rain whispers beyond the walls. Travelers drift slowly toward sleep beside the glowing embers. And somewhere far outside Bree, ancient roads continue winding silently through the rain-dark wilds of Middle-earth, while the old inn at the crossroads glows warm against the storm. Let us drift onward into the quieter hours before dawn, when even the stories begin growing sleepy beside the hearth of the Prancing Pony. The common room has nearly fallen silent now. Rain still taps steadily against the windows of the inn, while wind moves softly through Bree's narrow streets outside. But inside the Prancing Pony, only the crackling hearth and the occasional murmur of half-finished conversation remain. Most travelers now rest where they sit. Several hobbits sleep comfortably near the fire with cloaks pulled over their shoulders. The merchant from the south snores gently beside an empty bowl of stew. And one elderly farmer quietly dreams beneath the warm glow of a lantern hanging above the hearth. The ranger remains awake, though even he looks calmer now. The hard alertness carried by road-worn travelers has softened beneath the warmth of the inn. He sits quietly smoking beside the fading fire, while the last embers glow deep orange against the dark wood. The scholar notices him staring thoughtfully into the flames once more. "You've spent many nights on the road, haven't you?" The ranger nods slowly, enough to appreciate inns like this. Again, silence settles comfortably between them. Outside, the storm slowly begins weakening. The rain no longer crashes heavily upon the roof. Instead, it drifts softly across Bree in steady silver whispers. Somewhere beyond the windows, water trickles through the gutters, lining the muddy streets. The whole town seems wrapped in peaceful darkness. Barleyman Butterbur eventually returns carrying a small kettle of hot tea. Thought the last you awake might still need warming. The scholar smiles gratefully. The ranger simply nods once. Butterbur pours steaming cups before them. The smell of mint and honey rises pleasantly into the smoky air. Even after long years of travelers passing through Bree, the innkeeper still treats every guest with careful warmth. Perhaps that is why the Prancing Pony endures. Not because it is grand, but because weary people feel welcome there. The fire burns lower. Several lanterns have already been extinguished around the common room. Only soft amber pools of light remain now against the timber walls and sleeping travelers. The scholar leans back comfortably while listening to the storm fade outside. It almost feels strange leaving tomorrow. The dwarf grunts quietly from near the hearth. That means the inn is doing its job properly. A few sleepy chuckles drift through the room. Even the ranger smiles faintly again. The fiddler near the fire eventually lifts his instrument once more. Not for lively tavern music this time. Only a slow, wandering melody, soft enough to belong to dreams. The notes drift gently through the inn, warm, sleepy, peaceful. Rain taps softly beyond the shutters. The fire crackles. And for a little while, the whole world seems reduced to this one quiet room glowing against the dark. The scholar closes his eyes briefly while listening. The music reminds him of countless roads already traveled. Fog drifting across distant hills, lanterns beside lonely bridges, warm inns appearing through rain after cold, exhausting journeys. Travelers rarely remember every mile, but they always remember places where they rested safely. That is why stories gather inside taverns. Roads carry people outward, but inns gather them together again. At some point after midnight, Butterbur gently encourages the remaining guests toward their rooms. Beds are warmer than chairs, even in Bree, he says with a tired smile. One by one, travelers rise sleepily from the common room. Boots scrape softly against the wooden floor. Cloaks are gathered, lanterns lifted. The dwarf disappears upstairs, carrying one final piece of bread from the table. The merchant stumbles half asleep toward his room beneath the low beams. Soon only the ranger and scholar remain beside the hearth. The rain has nearly stopped now. Beyond the windows, Bree lies quiet beneath fading clouds. Ranger finally stands. For a moment, he rests one hand upon the back of the chair while staring into the dying fire. There will be roads again tomorrow, he says softly. The scholar nods, but not tonight. Again, that faint smile crosses the ranger's face. Then he lifts his cloak and heads quietly toward the stairs. The scholar remains beside the embers a little longer. The inn feels wonderfully peaceful now, almost dreamlike. Low lantern light, the smell of smoke and cedar wood, rainwater still dripping softly from the eaves outside. At last, even Butterbur extinguishes the final lantern near the counter. Only the hearth remains glowing softly against the darkness. Throughout the old Prancing Pony, travelers sleep warmly, while Bree rests peacefully beyond the windows, and the long, lonely roads of Middle-earth vanish quietly beneath the final rain of night. Let us remain in Bree a little longer, while dawn slowly approaches beyond the rain-dark hills, and the Prancing Pony drifts peacefully toward morning. The inn sleeps quietly now. Only the hearth still glows faintly within the common room. Deep red embers pulse softly beneath blackened logs, while thin ribbons of smoke drift lazily upward toward the dark ceiling beams. The storm outside has nearly passed. Rain falls only lightly across Bree's muddy streets. Occasionally, a final gust of wind brushes against the shutters before fading once more into silence. Upstairs, weary travelers rest deeply beneath thick quilts and warm wooden roofs. The dwarf snores heavily from somewhere down the hallway. A hobbit murmurs softly in sleep behind another door, and in a quiet corner room overlooking the rain-soaked street below, the scholar lies awake for a little while longer, listening to the peaceful sounds of the inn. Old taverns have their own nighttime music, floorboards settling gently, rain dripping from roof edges, faint fire crackling below, the distant creak of signs swaying softly outside. The scholar smiles faintly into the darkness. For all the danger carried by the roads of Middle-earth, places like the Prancing Pony remind travelers that warmth still exists between the wild places. Eventually, even the scholar drifts toward sleep. And for several quiet hours, the inn rests completely. Beyond Bree's walls, the wilderness stretches cold and dark beneath fading storm clouds. Ruined watchtowers disappear among distant hills. Forests stand silent beneath the final rain. Ancient roads wind endlessly through shadow toward lands most folk wisely avoid after dark. But none of that reaches the Prancing Pony tonight. Here, there is only safety, warm beds, soft rain, the deep, comforting stillness of an old inn holding back the wild for one more night. At last, sometime before dawn, the first signs of morning begin quietly appearing. The rain stops entirely. Clouds drift apart beyond Bree's rooftops. Ill silver light gathers faintly behind the eastern hills. Downstairs, Barleyman Butterbur wakes before the rest. As always, the innkeeper moves carefully through the dark common room, carrying a small lantern while trying not to disturb sleeping guests. He kneels beside the hearth and gently stirs the embers back into flame. Soon, warm orange light spreads once more through the room. The smell of fresh firewood mixes pleasantly with lingering cedar smoke from the long night. Butterbur smiles sleepily. Another quiet storm survived. Another innful of travelers resting safely beneath his roof. He begins preparing breakfast while dawn slowly brightens outside. Fresh bread enters the ovens. Kettles begin steaming softly. The smell of bacon and onions soon drifts warmly through the sleeping inn. One by one, travelers slowly begin waking upstairs. Bootsteps creak softly upon the wooden floors. Doors open. Sleepy voices murmur greetings through the hallway. The ranger descends first, as usual. He pauses briefly near the hearth while warming his hands beside the growing fire. Outside of windows, Bree still glistens with rain beneath the pale morning sky. Mud fills the streets. Lanterns burn low beside puddles reflecting the first light of dawn. The ranger studies the weather quietly. The roads will be softer today, Butterbur remarks while arranging mugs beside the counter. The ranger nods, but calmer. Soon the common room slowly comes alive once more. The dwarf arrives, grumbling cheerfully about squeaky floorboards. Several hobbits settle beside the hearth, wrapped in sleepy conversation. The scholar appears last, carrying the weathered journal beneath one arm. Breakfast is served generously. Warm bread, eggs, hot tea sweetened with honey. Travelers eat slowly while dawn continues spreading across Bree. Outside, birds begin singing softly among the rain-wet hedges beyond the town walls. Mist drifts gently above the distant hills. And somewhere far beyond Bree, the roads of Middle-earth wait patiently once more. But for now, no one seems eager to leave. The warmth of the inn lingers strongly after storm nights. Stories shared, I will tell no one dies about the earth. I take much one. Stories that tend the size of the world. Travelers from different roads, different lands, different lives. Yet for one quiet, rainy night, all of them shared the same fire, the same stories, the same peaceful shelter beneath the roof of the Prancing Pony. Perhaps that is why old inns matter so deeply in Middle-earth. Not because they stop the storms, but because they offer warmth while the storms pass outside. The ranger finally gathers his cloak near the doorway. The roads call again. They always do. Yet before leaving, he glances once more toward the glowing hearth, toward the sleepy travelers, toward Butterbur humming quietly while cleaning mugs behind the counter. And for just a moment, the hard miles waiting beyond Bree seem very far away. Outside, morning fully awakens across the hills of Eriador. The rain-washed roads shine pale beneath the soft dawn light. Smoke rises peacefully from Bree's chimneys. And inside the old Prancing Pony, warmth and stories linger gently in the air long after the storm has passed. Morning settles gently across Bree. The storm has passed entirely now. Soft, pale sunlight filters through drifting mist, while rainwater glimmers along the muddy streets outside the Prancing Pony. The town awakens slowly beneath the cool gray sky. Shopkeepers sweep water from their doorways. Stable boys lead sleepy horses toward fresh hay. Smoke rises warmly from chimneys across the hill town, and inside the inn, breakfast continues beside the glowing hearth. The common room feels wonderfully calm after the long, rainy night. Travelers sit quietly over tea and warm bread, while soft conversation drifts through the timbered hall. No one speaks loudly this early. The peacefulness of the storm still lingers somehow. Barlaman Butterbur moves cheerfully between the tables, carrying fresh mugs and steaming plates. The innkeeper hums softly beneath his breath, while sunlight slowly brightens the windows overlooking Bree's wet streets. The ranger finishes breakfast near the hearth, his weathered cloak now dry beside the fire. The scholar carefully closes the journal once more after adding several final notes about the evening. Rain, stories, warm lantern light beside the roads. The dwarf leans back heavily in his chair with the satisfied look of someone entirely unwilling to travel anywhere soon. Could stay another week, he mutters. Butterbur laughs warmly. Many folks say that. Outside, carts begin rolling once more along the muddy lanes. The roads of Middle-earth awaken patiently after the storm. Travelers prepare for distant journeys. Merchants repack wagons. Rangers disappear quietly beyond the gates. And somewhere far from Bree, lonely wilderness roads stretch beneath cold forests and ruined hills once more. Yet the Prancing Pony still glows warmly against all of it. An old, safe place at the crossroads. A lantern beside the dark. The scholar eventually rises and wanders briefly toward the front doorway. Cool morning air drifts softly inward, carrying the smell of wet earth and rain-soaked grass. The streets shine silver beneath the pale sunlight. Several hobbits laugh quietly while crossing the square, carrying baskets beneath their cloaks. Beyond the town walls, distant hills fade gently into morning mist. The scholar smiles. Bree may not be grand like Minas Tirith, nor ancient like Rivendell, but there is comfort in ordinary places. Warm inns, friendly fires, simple breakfasts after rain. Perhaps those are the places travelers remember most. The ranger eventually joins him near the doorway. For a moment, both simply watch the quiet town waking beyond the inn. Then the scholar speaks softly. Funny how storms make places feel warmer afterward. The ranger nods. They remind you what shelter means. Again, silence settles comfortably. Not awkward silence. The peaceful kind shared between travelers who understand roads. At last, the ranger pulls his hood over his dark hair. The time has come to leave. Roads never stop calling for long. Yet, before stepping outside, he glances back one final time toward the common room, toward the glowing hearth, toward Butterbur laughing warmly beside the counter, toward the sleepy travelers lingering over tea while sunlight slowly fills the inn. Then quietly, the ranger disappears into the misty morning streets of Bree. One by one, the others leave as well. The dwarf gathers his trade goods. The scholar secures the weathered journal carefully beneath his cloak. Several hobbits wander out laughing softly into the fresh morning air. Soon the common room grows quieter once more. Only the fire remains crackling softly beside the hearth. Butterbur pauses for a moment while wiping down one of the empty tables. The innkeeper smiles faintly to himself. Another stormy night. Another gathering of stories beside the fire. The Prancing Pony has seen thousands of such evenings. Travelers arriving tired from the road, rain tapping against the windows, warm soup, lantern light, stories drifting through the smoke-filled air, and always, by morning, the roads calling everyone onward once again. Yet the inn remains, patient, warm, waiting beside the crossroads of the north. Outside, sunlight finally breaks fully through the clouds above Bree. The wet streets shine gold. Birdsong echoes softly beyond the town walls. And somewhere far down the road, travelers continue carrying with them the memory of one quiet rainy evening beside the hearth of the Prancing Pony.